looks like, but I'm gonna do my best here. So big thing is market update. We're still waiting for the stimulus package. Hopefully they're close. We're expecting something hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. We really need the stimulus package to kind of keep everybody going. So it is something that we're definitely keeping a close eye on. If the stimulus package gets approved, I think what you're going to see initially is you're going to see the stock market rally, and you're going to see bonds sell off. Mortgage-backed securities, for you that don't know, mortgage-backed securities are bonds, so you could potentially see rates spike a little bit short-term due to the positivity in the market. So we're keeping a close eye on that, and a lot of times, like purchases right now, we're locking right away. Refis, I'm not as worried about because we have more time on refis, and I feel like although it would be a short-term rate spike, it's not going to last very long. And the market will continue to go lower. And the reason we believe that the market's going to continue to have low rates for an extended period of time is the Federal Reserve meeting was this week, and the notes came out. And basically the Federal Reserve came out and said that they're going to keep rates at or close to zero at least through 2023. So that's almost another 3 years after going forward that rates will stay at between 0 and 0.25%. Now, when I say rates are going to be at zero, I'm talking about the federal funds rate. That's the interest rate that big banks lend between each other. That's how they borrow money. It's usually on a daily basis. So bank one will borrow money from bank two, and they'll either charge them 0 to 0.25% interest. Then when you go to get a credit card or a home equity loan, those rates are also based on the Fed fund rate. Why is it not zero? It's because now the banks are putting a margin on top of it. So typically the prime rate that you see on a HELOC or a home equity line of credit or on your credit card, that prime Fed lending rate is usually 3.25 right now is what you're seeing most of the time. So the banks can make a margin. The idea behind the Federal Reserve keeping rates super low like this is it makes it free basically for banks to lend money, and it makes it really easy for them to make money on the money they're lending. Again, if the bank is getting money at 0% and they can turn around and give it to somebody for a car loan at 4%, their margin is 4% on that money. So it's basically trying to promote banks to lend money to stimulate the economy and keep things moving and get things rebooted once this pandemic hopefully goes away. So that's great news that they're going to keep it low, and it's definitely going to help keep mortgage rates low for at least the next couple of years. And I think you're going to see some amazing movement in the real estate market from that. And then another report that came out this week that I think it was really cool, CoreLogic reported the homeowners with mortgages, which is about 63% of houses have a mortgage on it. And those properties that they were tracking increased 10.1% over the last year in equity. So the big thing is you got a $400,000 house. In 1 year, it's now worth $440,000. So the idea behind that for both our agent partners and our clients that are on this call is now you do have clients that have equity that might have the ability to sell and move up to the next house. You know, maybe they got a house, that first time house that's not as big as they would like. They want to increase it. They can sell it at top dollar right now because the market is so hot. Yeah, they're going to have to pay to play to get to the next level. But the nice idea behind that is interest rates are so low, the affordability index is way higher. So even though you're going to lose a little bit because you're going to have to pay more for the new house, the lower rates are going to offset those gains and put them in a better situation to hopefully upgrade now. So now is a great time to take a look at doing stuff like that, looking at buying a new house if you don't own one, or upgrading the house you have and get into something nicer. So with all that said, that's my update for today. I know a lot of people are working at home. We got this pandemic around us, and the big thing that happens, at least to me, sitting here working at my house, is I get distracted. I lose track of time. I procrastinate. I'm actually one of the best procrastinators I know, although I haven't gotten around to it. Anyways, so we wanted to bring someone on that would talk about time management to kind of get everybody on track and really give some people kind of coming up to the end of the year and getting ready for January to kind of get their stuff together. So we brought on Penny Zenker. She's one of America's leading experts in psychology of productivity to eliminate distraction, perfectionism, and self-sabotage to maximize results in every area of your life. Who could not use some help there? Penny, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you. I'm super excited to watch what you have to say. And without further ado, take it away.
Here I am talking away and I'm muted. So excited to be here with you guys. Thank you so much for having me. And, you know, you talked about this pandemic thing that's around. I think this topic is more important than ever. So we already had, before the pandemic, 60% of people felt that they were emotionally distracted, physically depleted, and just not at their best. And so, you know, so it's that much more of an important topic. And so, you know, let's use the chat and let's be interactive here. And also just to set your settings so that you have half the screen me and half the screen the slides. What you do is you go up to view options and you go down to the bottom where it says side by side. And that'll allow you to drag the window so that you can have some proportion there, because the slides are just part of what you're going to be gaining today. So get that set up and tell me in the chat, who here can relate to the tug of war with time? Anybody having a tug of war with time? Right? It's not just time that we have. It's tug of war with even sometimes our values and principles, right? Yeah, thank you guys for sharing. Yes, every day, everything, right? It's funny. And, you know, lately I was thinking about, I've been doing a lot of talks on resilience, not just time management, but also around resilience. And it made me dig a little deeper into that tagline that I have, which is the tug of war. Like, what is that exactly? You know, I used it in my book and we can all relate to it, but I thought, you know, I want to dig deeper. And, you know, it's funny when I think of deeper, I just want to share this funny, quick little quip. Is I remember it was like my 4th or 5th date with my boyfriend, and we were sitting across the table, and it was going to get serious or it wasn't from this point. So I said, you know, I really need to be able to share some of my deeper thoughts. I need to really be able to connect with you at a deeper level. And he got all nervous, right? And we saw him gulp really, really hard. And he goes, well, how deep? And I said, shark deep. So guys, we're going shark deep today, all right? So when I tell you the definition that I looked up of the tug of war is, it's a struggle for control. Now, if we dig deeper into that struggle for control, that's really where our greatest challenge lies, is that with the pandemic especially, and I want you to be thinking about this throughout the presentation, is that we are so focused on so many things that are outside of our control. And we exhaust ourselves with all the cares, concerns, the worries, and all the energy that we put on what's not within our control. And then what happens is we experience learned helplessness. And learned helplessness means that when it comes to the things that we can control, then we are seemingly powerless to it, right? We're weakened. And so I want you to think about that, because obviously we're not here to talk about the things that you can't control, but we are going to talk about today the things that you can control, and how you show up and what you focus on is 100% within your control. So with that said, I want to take a journey back to too many years ago when I started my own technology business, and I built it up to a multi-million-dollar business. And, you know, from the outside, it looked like everything was going great. We were bringing on new clients, we were hiring new staff, and we were growing like mad. But the challenge was that it was killing me. I had started from just me, and I had built it up, and I had some dysfunctions that got in my way. You know how sometimes we can't get out of our own way, and that's why we reach a certain plateau and we just get stuck. We can't get to the next level. You know, we see that in sales all the time, that people hit a plateau, right? It's because we hit an area in our mindset. It's either the skills that we have don't get us to the next level, or our mindset keeps us from getting to the next level. So I had a couple of dysfunctional behaviors, and I want to share them with you because it's obviously what I learned through them. But also, interesting enough, I noticed that, you know, this expression, old habits die hard. I noticed at the start of the pandemic, when the real stresses came on, For me as a public speaker, everything was canceled all at once. So my income went from wherever it was to zero. So it's a little stressful. So, and we all know we've all have different challenges that have come up through us the pandemic. But so some of my dysfunctional behaviors came back for a period of time. So I want you to create a heightened awareness of where you might have some dysfunctional behaviors and how you handled them before the pandemic and how you want to handle them and how you can create a heightened awareness to recognize them more quickly and not stay there, but quickly shift back into what I call the productivity zone. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. So first of all, I tried to work harder, right? This little voice inside me said, it's okay, just work a little harder, put in a few more hours, that will solve your problem. Well, there's only so many more hours that you can put in. I was working 36-hour shifts a couple of times a month, and it was burning me out. I was tired. What happens when we're tired? What happens when you guys are tired? Do you get grumpy? Do you get do you have a really small threshold for you to like freak out? Do you blame other people? Do you complain? I don't know how you show up, but some of that was, I'm embarrassed to say, came out for me during this process because I was trying to work it out, but that's not working smarter, right? That's just working harder, and it doesn't work. Did that work for anyone else here? Did it work for you? No, I see a lot of head shaking. So that doesn't work. And then I tried to control everything and everyone. Don't worry, I'm a recovering micromanager and a recovering perfectionist, but that was where I was. And the more I micromanaged people, the more the more we chase control, the less we have of it, right? It's a paradox, and it's where self-sabotage lives in that space. So we have to be really focused, as I said, on the things that we can control. We can't control other people. We can't control how they think. We might be able to influence what they do and what they think. So we need to be aware, though, of what battles we're choosing to fight. And then lastly is, I avoided ownership. I did blame and complain. And I just said, well, it's not me. It must be everyone else, because I just wasn't maybe mature enough, or I just didn't want to see it. So I had this opportunity to sell my business, and I jumped at it. I thought, that's perfect, because maybe this entrepreneur thing isn't for me. And I got an offer from a company that wanted me to go work as their chief technology officer. And it was for a daughter company of a big market research company. So I thought, that's fantastic. I'm going to go to a 9-to-5 job. This is going to be a piece of cake. Usually when I'm in corporate, they are all laughing, ha, ha, ha. Right? But that's what I thought. We often think that the grass is greener on the other side. So we make a move, we make a change, and we think that's going to change things. But that's not really what happened, right? What happened is that it followed me, all that dysfunctional behavior. And it followed me because the situation got even more pronounced, because as I was starting that position, they asked me to be in a task force, and I had to take over my boss's position as a result of the task force, which was responsible for 5 companies across 4 countries. So if I was micromanaging and overworking before, I was way caught in the weeds now. And this was all in German, because I was living in Zurich, Switzerland at the time. So I was way out of my league. And now, instead of blaming everyone else, I blamed myself. I'm like, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. This isn't going to be the right thing for me. So I went into my boss's office, and I said to him everything that I needed to say. So, and he listened really carefully. And then he said to me, Penny, I hired you to make decisions, and what you do with the rest of your time is up to you. I was so pissed. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculously oversimplified, right? Wouldn't you be pissed if somebody gave you that piece of advice? But sometimes we get advice and coaching and counseling at a time when we're not ready to hear it. And that was definitely one of those times. But I did hear it, and it did sink in, and eventually I got it. He was right. What he was telling me was that in my role, that those strategic decisions that I was going to make were the 20% that was going to make 80% of the difference. It's the Pareto principle. The 20% of my actions were going to make 80% of the results. It's not saying, and he didn't mean it, he was just oversimplifying it, but I needed to hear it that way because I was caught up in the weeds and the complexity that I created. Sometimes we create unnecessary complexity. Yes or yes? Yes. Notice I didn't give you a choice for anything else. So, and then we can always break down that 80%. Thank you for the loud laughter. I appreciate that. So we can always break down that extra 80% into 80-20 again, right? So that we can create leverage and multipliers and really get clear on what's most important. And what was so powerful about that lesson was it taught me and gave me permission to let go of the perfectionism and the control that I felt like I needed to have on everything. It freed me so that I could really get clear on what was that 20%. And that's the way I live my life now, is I try to constantly step back and reevaluate that. And you might feel, this is a famous quote by the famous Mike Tyson, that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. You might feel that way as part of the pandemic, right? I felt that way in what I had to take over, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. It was unexpected. And so really the gist of it, of what my mentor taught me, in addition to this, living by the Pareto principle, not just knowing it, but living it, it taught me to slow down, to step back, to simplify things, and to start with the end in mind. So you do have to have that plan, but you also have to have a process to reset. And that's what I want you to think about, is how you're able to reset quickly. So from that, I created this, and you're all going to get a copy of my best-selling book, The Productivity Zone. I'll send you a link and you can log in electronically and download it. And this is the framework that's involved in there. It's a high-performance framework that talks about the balance of efficiency and effective. Because, in the United States especially, we have this need for speed, and everything is fast, 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 fast. But it has a cost to do things quickly, right? We can make mistakes and we can go down the wrong path and things like that. So we want to be efficient, but we also want to be effective. And by the way, don't get hung up on this curve. It's not a standard deviation. So if you're a science, math-minded person, let that go. It's just to show you that in the center is a pretty large space, and there's actually 10 core drivers that will help us get into the productivity zone when we fall out. We're actually not going to talk about those 10 drivers today, but they are in the book, so you can read more in detail about that. And then what's outside the zone? How do we recognize ourselves? And this gives us an opportunity to step back and evaluate our performance with a process, and also with a structure that helps us to detach a little bit, because it's not easy to look at ourselves in the mirror and see what's not working, right? Or where our shortcomings are. Of course, it's easy to look at somebody else and say, hey, I see exactly where you need to change, but it's harder for ourselves. So I created this framework to be sort of a coaching framework for people, and identify where they might be under-functioning or over-functioning. So what might be outside the zone when we're under-functioning and over-functioning is, what do you think it is? Let's hear what you guys think is the common trait to that. Let's get you guys involved here. And thank you guys for constantly chatting it up there. I appreciate it. It keeps me motivated to hear the chat. Anyone, what's the commonality, or did you fall asleep already?
Can you repeat? Penny, could we get that question one more time?
Sure. For over and under functioning, there's a common trait that is for both of those. They throw us into a common state. What do you think it might be?
Trying to do too much.
Trying to do too much. Well, over functioning is definitely trying to do too much. Under functioning is doing not enough. Control, exhaustion. Thank you guys. Lack of discipline, procrastination. Stress, Jalen, yes, you got it. So the commonality.
I read the book.
Oh, you read the book. Oh, you gave it away. You shouldn't have said that.
Sorry.
So the commonality is stress, right? We have stress when we're outside of the zone. It's because this is where our unproductive emotions drag us outside the zone. They get us more reactive than proactive. Being in the zone and focusing on the things that get us in the zone make us proactive, and the things that take us out make us more reactive. So those unproductive behaviors are forms of control, by the way. So that is why I mentioned control earlier, right? Overfunctioning and perfectionism, that's about control. And, you know, there's maybe fear driving that, but it's also about control. And so is procrastination. So, and that's a form of underfunctioning. But I wanted to bring it together into another commonality that they have, is they're both distractions. They distract us from what we want to be focusing on, and they keep us from the very things that we want to achieve. And interesting enough, distractions are also learned helplessness. How many of you guys think that you have at least 50% that are within your control to eliminate, reduce, or anywhere therein? What do you think? You can pop it into the chat. That way we don't have everybody talking over each other, because I know you all want to share. How many people think yes? Just say yes or no. Over 50%. So I see some head shaking. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I just want to see who's delusional. So does anyone want to say no? Okay. Not after I said that, right? So you guys took a distraction quiz. So I want to know, pop into the chat, what'd you get? What'd you get and what did you notice? Hamster, squirrel. And I checked it out and I saw there's a pretty even distribution for what I typically see when I have groups do this. And it's okay if you don't want to put it on there, you don't have to share it. But I know where you are. So lots of hamsters, lots of squirrels. That's where most people were. I don't think I saw, unless anybody took it after I saw, I didn't see any wizards. So people are, and maybe you were a wizard before the pandemic, and with all that's going on and filling your mind and distracting you, maybe you've moved into hamster or squirrel mode, or maybe you were a hamster or squirrel and now you're a time zombie, right? The idea is just to give you a heightened awareness of where you are, so that you think about in more detail what it is that's distracting you, so that you can take control of the things that are within your control. And so just want to bring to your attention that, because it may not have been so clear when you take it online, is there's 3 different areas of distractions, 3 different categories. One of them is physical. You might be exhausted. And even if you get enough sleep, you can be exhausted, right? Because our emotional side can impact our physical side. And the emotions are huge, right? The emotions are all over the place with what we've had to deal with this year in terms of environmental, with fires and storms and politics and the pandemic itself. So it's a lot of emotional distraction going on as well. And then environmental, you're working from home, you might have kids at home, and it's disrupted and taken everything out of whack of what and how we're used to dealing with things. So we have to create awareness about it. It's like solving any problem, is that if you just leave it out there as a real high level, oh, I'm super distracted, well, that doesn't help. What specifically is distracting you, so that you can specifically do something about them? And so what I'd like to do is just have you take a moment and write down, what's the number one distraction that if you were to eliminate that or reduce it down significantly, that you would get the greatest boost in your productivity. So I want you to write that down now, a smartphone, and you can, put it in the chat, family. Yeah, it could be, right? And there's ways to handle it too, right? Our greatest gifts of technology, they can make us more productive, and they can also make us less productive. So the phone, a lot of people say phone. I hear people saying email. There's fatigue and being tired, right? There's all of those types of things. So get clear for yourself. What's that number one thing? Because by getting clear on what it is, now I want you to get clear on what it's costing you. Working out of the home, deer in the headlights, boredom, right? So lots of different things that are coming up. What's it costing you? If you were to continue with this distraction and it gets bigger every year, right? And you were to look a year, 2 years, 3 years out, what's it costing you? Could you be losing financially because you're not making the money because you're distracted? You're not focused on the right things? Could it be that, somebody said fear? Could it be that you become so anxious, right, about what's going on with the pandemic that you can't go anywhere? Could it be that, you actually, your relationship is affected and you end up getting divorced, or or it hurts your relationship with your kids, or you're working so many hours that it exhausts you and maybe even causes a heart attack? Now, I get it. I'm making it really bad, right? But we have to do that. We are 100 times more driven away from pain than towards pleasure. So I want you to get connected with what it's costing you, because the very things that you want in your life, that meaning, that happiness, that connection, that financial freedom, whatever it is, these distractions are costing you that. And I want you to realize that, and I want you to write that down. Right? We're really clear on what's distracting us, which is good. You've got that. So many responsibilities, control, fear, boredom, right? Great. Oops. So go ahead and identify the cost. And then we're going to come back, and before this is over, I'm going to challenge you to do something about it, right? To take an action. So start thinking about what action you're going to take, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks around that. So we're going to look at some strategies to get back in and stay in the productivity zone. So I call these gatekeeper strategies to protect our focus and to protect our time. And so I actually came up with these because I work with some sales trainers on how to get past the gatekeeper. And in these different sales teams, and during one of the training sessions I was doing, I realized that we don't just need gatekeepers in sales to protect the CEO from getting meetings with people that they don't want meetings with. We need gatekeepers in every area of our life. It might not just be a person that's in between. But so here's some 3 categories of gatekeepers that we can think about that can help us to protect our time, our focus, and really stay more purposeful about what we want to do with our time versus, whatever the demands are of our time. It has to be what deserves our time. So number 1 is rules. We have to have rules in place that help act as those guardrails to keep us on the path. And those rules, they help us because they help us to be less fatigued. Somebody mentioned fatigue earlier. We get decision fatigue from having to decide all the time. I get decision fatigue on having to plan so many meals now that I never had to plan before. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but when you have some rules and structures in place, it can support you so that you don't need to think as much about it because you can fall back on these rules. And I'll explain in a little bit more detail each one of these areas. We have to have filters, right? We have to have a way to eliminate the waste, eliminate the things that don't come through, that don't get your attention or your time. We all can understand that. And then lastly, we have to set ourselves up with an environment that supports us. And so that means that we need to make sure that the things that we have around us are supporting us versus hurting us, right? Because there's actually a 60% for people who are drug addicted. When they come out of the facilities after they get support, there's a 60% relapse rate because of the environment. So environment is paramount. We really don't give enough attention to taking a look and securing our environment. So let's take a look at those. So this is, I'll send you these slides so that you can have them. We're going to go through each one of these a little bit. So we've got our rules, we've got our filters, and we've got the environment, and then different strategies in each area. Now, these might not be exhaustive. You might think of some others as well, but let's go in and take a look at rules, for example. So standards and principles can be a type of a rule that can support us. So I use this picture because in the beginning of the pandemic, I've always had a rule for myself that I get up when the alarm goes off. It's kind of a personal standard, my personal productivity standard. But as the pandemic started and I was feeling more tired and more stressed, and I started to slip, and I saw myself hitting snooze and sleeping in. And I thought, nah, this isn't good, because I saw myself doing that, then allowing myself in other areas to slip, right? To eat the kind of sweets and foods that I don't like eating or aren't good for me, and so forth. I'd see it in other areas. I wouldn't take the time to work out, or I wouldn't finish a workout. I'd be like halfway through and then it'd be like, that's good enough. And so I see that these rules are really important for me. So I started to make sure that I was setting those rules and keeping those rules for myself, so that if I set the alarm the night before for 6 a.m., then that's when I get up. And I make sure and I remind myself every morning, this is who I am. This is my personal standard. So I want you to be thinking about, what's a personal standard for you, and how can that support you? You know, being on time is a personal standard. Do you find yourself slipping? How do you connect it to a value that, like, I was late. I started to be late too, because I was starting to just try to get more things done a couple of years ago. And I realized that I was disrespecting the other person when I would show up 5 minutes late. And I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. When I connected that to my value and realized I was breaking my values, it made all the difference for me to hold that line. So I want you to be thinking of that, as to what are some of the, either the dysfunctional behaviors, how can you relate it back to a value, a standard, or a principle, so that you can get back on track. Does that make sense? Are you guys tracking with me here? Give me a shout out in the chat, and maybe put in there, what's a value or principle that you want to remind yourself of and be connected to every day, so that it helps you show up at your best. Thank you. So go ahead and put that in there. Here's another principle and a boundary that I set for myself, is no news in the morning. So in the mornings, I have some boundaries where I say, I don't watch the news. I don't check my email, because it makes me reactive first thing. I don't do that. I don't check social media. So it's not only what we do, but it's also getting clear on what we shouldn't do. Thank you guys for putting in your items here. That's awesome. No work calls after 5. That's a great example. That might be a good boundaries too, right? Not just a standard, but also a boundary to set. This is when I start work. This is where I end work. Now, I know it's a little bit more difficult for you guys because of the schedules that you might have with being available for your clients, but you can still set that for yourself. And it's important that you do that. And then you can communicate that to your family. And then set time limits going into your email. Kevin Cruz has a system that he calls 3210 for zero inbox. I don't think you should give your inbox that much focus to say that you're focused on zero inbox, but I like the system. He says, check it 3 times a day for 21 minutes. And so with that, some people, they can't go from the standard today is 150 times a day that people are checking their email. So, you know, that might cause a little bit of an addiction problem. So maybe you can't go to only 3 times a day, but maybe you could just check it at the top of every hour. Give yourself the benefit of focus for the time that you're there. And this isn't just your email. This is also your phone. And since I think some of you guys are in real estate agents, so I want to share that I was out with an agent, and we were looking at some houses, and she must have picked up her phone to check it and to answer calls at least 10 times while we were together. And I felt disrespected. I felt like she wasn't giving me the priority and the attention because she was out with me. So we also want to be thinking about, and don't realize, how are people perceiving this when we're with other people and we're checking our phone and we're taking phone calls and things like that. Maybe it's your family, right? And you're doing it at dinner. My brother used to check his phone all the time. This is back when he had a BlackBerry. He's just not that important, right? But it makes everybody else feel unimportant. So I want you to be thinking about that and its impact on everyone else, and its impact on you. Again, these things have a cost in the long term. Some filters to think about. Have a daily plan. Start your day with a daily plan. And I'm going to share with you my 1-3-5 method of daily planning, which is do one thing that takes you further in a strategic long-term goal. Do 3 things that you're working towards midterm milestones, and do 5 things that you absolutely must do yourself today. And then also, before you start the day, set an intention. Identify your wins at the end of the day. We always tend to focus on the things that we didn't do. I know that I used to do this. And so I started to collect my daily wins so that I could also end the day on a positive note. And it's made a huge difference in my attitude, in the way that I show up, and feeling good as I transition into my evening. And then I identify your distractions and also what you're grateful for. So this is a little worksheet that you can use on a daily basis just to keep yourself organized and keep yourself focused. It's not only those 9 things that you're going to get done. You're going to have that backup list, like Warren Buffett has 2 lists. He's got his primary list and then he's got his backup list. But this way, you know that these are the most important things for you to do. Debbie said, there's a 5-minute journal that helps you start your day and then note your wins in the evening, right? Same type of thing. Just make sure that you've got some kind of system that's supporting you to stay focused on what's most important. Questions, those are also really important filters, because if you got any trash talk going on, or you feel overwhelmed, you can just ask yourself a question. Questions will shift your focus. And it's also good for you to ask questions of others, and it will shift their focus. If they're in a bad state of mind or you want to change the subject, right? You can ask a question and shift the focus. And it's also, a question has a light, curious energy. So it also is more, how do I say it? It controls the focus, but it's also a lighter way to do that. And so if you're overwhelmed, a simple question might just be, what's next? I use this picture because when I was rock climbing, I was told, don't fixate on the end, because it's gonna feel like it's so far away and it's impossible. So your real focus is gonna be, where do I put my hands and feet in the next position, right? So what's next for you will keep you in motion. And as long as you know what the next couple of steps are, and every once in a while, as I said, slow down and step back and simplify and set that plan with the end goal in mind, identify what those things are, and then get back into motion. And then use those goals and that 20% to help you to stay focused on the outcome, right? Be solution oriented and focus on the outcome. So I'm going to go through these environment ones, and then I want you to share, did one of those stick for you? Do you have one that works for you? Did you have one before the pandemic? So I want you to be thinking about that you haven't been working with, and now you need to bring that back, right? I want you to be thinking about, what are some of these strategies that resonate? And I also suggest that when there's an area like your phone that's a major distraction, you might want to pick 3 strategies that help you, because sometimes our excuses get past the first one. So if we have 3 strategies to support us, then it might be even more helpful for us to really stay focused on the result that we want versus the ease of an excuse or veering away. So in our environment, right, is accessibility. So accessibility means having it right available for you. So this is actually something that I really have. It's a water jug, and it helps me to drink more water, because it tells me if I fill it all the way up, then I can see how I'm doing throughout the day, and it reminds me that it's time for me to drink water. So it can help you if it's in your environment, but if it's your phone sitting there and beeping and buzzing and distracting you while you're working on something else, well, that can be a distraction, and it can hurt you, and it can make, at the end of the day, you might have to work on something twice as long because you're distracted so often. So think about that. So yeah, Jalen said music, right? Music is something in the environment that can really uplift you and boost your productivity. And actually there's scientific studies that show that that's true, that certain types of music actually stimulate that for you to get you into a rhythm and a mode. And it kind of, it helps you with your conscious and your unconscious, because it gives your conscious mind something to kind of pay attention to while you're focused also unconsciously on something else. So, right, so she's made a rule just to listen to uplifting music before noon each day, right? And it helps a ton. I used to use music to as my transitions and my breaks. So if I was going to take a break, then I would listen to a song that would lift me up and energize me. We have to energize ourselves. Somebody mentioned fatigue earlier. I'm sure that's not the only person. So we have to take energy breaks, right? So right now you could probably use an energy break. So just stand up for a second and take a deep breath. Come on, do it. I can see you, remember? So stand up, right? Because we sit at our desk, learned helplessness. We sit and we sit. So that's it. Just stand up and stretch and take a deep breath. And, in the Tony Robbins event, they tell you to shake that ass and they have you shake it around. So whatever, right? That's the dance or whatever it is, but movement is going to really help you to take those transitions. You want to set up reminders in your environment to remind you of the things that are important, to remind others of what's important to you. So this is a sign that's on my door that's helped me, that when my door is closed, that it keeps my kids from coming in and disrupting me. And, it can be funny, right? But we have to have this, and then I have to hold the line. I have to remind them that there's a sign there as well, and when the door is closed, because sometimes, like out of guilt, they're home, and I didn't used to do that, and I wouldn't remind them, and they would come in anyway, and this was before the sign was there, and I was frustrated, and things took me a lot longer. I wanted to spend more time with them, and it ended up I spent a lot less time with them because I was interrupted all the time, and I was then upset about it. But I wasn't just upset with them, I was upset with me, because I didn't hold the line. I didn't tell them, please don't interrupt me for the next hour. Please don't interrupt me until it's lunchtime. And so having this sign helps me also to remind me to remind them, if that makes any sense. And also you want to take a look at your environment and clean some of the clutter. Now, I'm gonna make a contradiction here in also saying is that we also have to give ourselves permission not to be perfect and not to have everything done. So don't worry about, as much about the whole house, right? And everything, but have a space for yourself that you can go to that's clean, and that it's a place for you to be able to think and look at. Like I have one counter in the kitchen that I try to keep clean and have nothing on it, just so that I can look there if I need peace, right? Because I can't control everything else. My kids are here and I'm not going to constantly pick up after them. So that's my way of doing it. So it might be for you, it might be your desk at the end of every day. Just take 5 minutes to clear that up so that you have some, when you come down in the morning, that you have that space and that it's clear for you. Because the clutter in our environment also creates clutter in our mind, and vice versa, right? Clutter in our mind creates us to create clutter in the environment. So go ahead and pop into the chat and tell me, so Jalen shared her music. What's a gatekeeper that really supports your productivity, helps you to focus, and helps you to block distractions? What can you implement that's going to make a difference for you? Are you going to put your phone on airplane mode and put it in the drawer and put it in the other room? Get a personal assistant? I'm doing a presentation later for a group of entrepreneurs, and you could just save, even if you only had a personal assistant that did a few things for you. There's people on there's a place that I use called freeup.com, and I can definitely give you guys access if you want. And it's people all over the world. So the best people that I've had supporting me are in the Philippines. They speak great English. And I can at least get back 1 or 2 hours a day that support me tremendously for the whole week, right? What would that do for you if you had somebody to support you just 1 hour a day? That could make a difference. So Jamie says a do not disturb sign. And then you've got to hold the line, Jamie. You've got to hold the line and make sure that it works. And you've got to have a conversation about it, right? That's the important thing, is that you're supporting it in other ways too. Yeah, so Sky said it helps her to change rooms and to sit down in different locations. That helps me too. Why do you think people go and work in Starbucks? Not now, but used to. If you change rooms in your house, that can give you a fresh outlook, a fresh perspective. So, and energize you. And you have to take breaks throughout the day. That's also a way to guard against distraction is taking those breaks, because that way you feel refreshed and you can go back in and then say, okay, what am I working on? And then get focused on what's the 20% that you need to do in that hour. So let's see what else you got here. And then I want to do a little exercise with you guys. Awesome. So if we look at that framework, there's actually 3 different categories of how we get in and stay in the productivity zone. And those strategies, they go across all of these. It's getting rid of the head trash and understanding that our mindset is absolutely critical, that how we approach things and our strategy is important for us to understand and stay focused on. And sustainability, right, is identifying, and there's different drivers into each one of these. These 10 drivers go across these 3 different areas. And we're not going to talk about all of those today, but some of those strategies that we talked about went across. And I know we didn't go deep into them, but I wanted to highlight a broad view of them so that you could then look back and make some, because really all you need to do today is to make one change. One change will make all the difference. Identify the one distraction and make, like I said, the rule of 3. Pick 3 things that you can do that'll reinforce and support you eliminating or reducing that distraction. So I'm going to come back to this, Debbie. Remind me that that it's guilt about not answering your phone, that you feel like the customer service. Remind me, I want to come back to that at the end. But I want to do this exercise because I want to talk about mindset. We have the what side of our brain, which is the logical side, which tells us what we should do to be more productive and more focused and to block out distractions. But we're emotional beings, right? And that's the other side of our brain. That's the how. That's where the anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, right? Debbie, what you're talking about there is guilt and fear. Fear that somebody won't be there if they call and you don't answer right away. So we've got to address those things just as much as we do in getting clarity on what to do, because we don't do what we know. That's a fact. And if we look at it, we think, right, that we are logical, but we're not. We don't think logically and act rationally. So we have to understand that and incorporate that into our practices. And as I said, come up with some different ways to provide those gatekeepers, those structures to help us do what we want to do and achieve what we want to achieve versus what those excuses want us to do. So I want to do a quick little workshop here. And I'm gonna set a timer for 45 seconds. And I want you to say out loud to yourself, and I want you to say it out loud because it's important that you hear yourself and that it comes through because it affects your nervous system. I want you to say out loud all the activities that you do from the morning until the evening or as far as you get with I have to. I have to wake up in the morning. I have to walk the dog. I have to have coffee. I have to go to a morning meeting. I have to. So all the way through. So for 45 seconds, you're going to say that out loud, and then I'll stop you, and then we'll check in. All right, go. Okay, stop. So put some words in the chat that represent how you feel after that. And notice in your body too, physically, how it feels. Are you constrained? Are you heavy? That's a good word. Ugh. I haven't heard that one before. What are some words? Exhausted, overwhelmed. Let's hear them. What are some other words that describe that? Overused, focused. What else? Couple more. I want to shut down and curl up in a ball. I feel there were a lot of things that I have to, but I don't have to. Okay, we'll get there. Just wanted you to follow the way that this went, right? So some people feel energized. That's great. That's great. But most people, when I hear that feedback and curl into a ball, overused, overwhelmed, exhausted, right? That's the way most people feel when they show up in a have to mode. And I get it. Maybe that's not how you show up all the time. But when I recognized, when I did this exercise, there's more times that I showed up like a have to than I wanted to. And that I would be honest with myself that there were more of those times, especially under stress, especially now, right? So welcome to your lives, right? And this is not acceptable. This is when we are emotionally taken away and we allow ourselves to be reactive and emotional. So we have to be purposeful and we have to set that up from the beginning of the day, because what I didn't say earlier that I meant to say was that this element of our brain, the way that we show up, and I talk about this in my book, is that energy is everything, right? Einstein talked about energy and he says, everything is energy. Well, that's true. And anyone who can walk into a room and suck the energy right out of the room. They could do it on the phone, as a matter of fact, right? It's crazy. Hopefully you don't live with that person. But the thing is we have to be the master of our energy, right? We bring the weather. So what I want you to do, one word, I want you to realize the power of language and our words and how it impacts us and how it can impact other people and how it can totally shift the energy. So I want you to do the same exercise. I'll give you 45 seconds. And you're going to say out loud all you do from the morning until the evening. And don't worry if it's not exactly the same for those of you who might suffer from perfectionism. It doesn't matter. You're just going to say, I'm grateful to get up in the morning. I'm grateful to walk the dog. I'm grateful to have my coffee, etc. All right, so go. Okay, stop. So what are some words that describe that? Go ahead and give me some words that describe that. Joy, lighter, feels totally different. My whole demeanor changed. I have so much to be grateful for. We forget, we delete, distort, and generalize things. And unfortunately, a lot of times we will focus on the things we don't have versus the things that we have, right? That's that control, the things that we can't control versus the things we can control, right? So uplifting, right? You're hearing all these words and you're feeling it in your body. That's why I wanted you to say it out loud. Because when you're doing this with a partner, you're smiling, you see that they're standing more upright. It's a completely different experience. And for those of you who didn't do it out loud, I hope that you still wrote it down or you did it in your head. If you were off checking your email, well, there's a sign that you have a challenge and you need to work on that and stay focused on some little exercises that can support you so that you can be less stressed and more focused on the things that are most important. And what I actually found when I did this, and let me know if some of the things that I said changed. So I started to focus on things that did bring me joy and just deleted the things that didn't. Or I would say because. And when you say because, that brings some additional meaning to the picture. So I would say I was grateful to walk the dog because she brings us so much joy. I didn't do it on purpose. It just automatically came out because now I'm connecting the things that I do, even if they're mundane, to the purpose that they might have in my life. And that makes it so much easier. Then I enjoy going for a walk. And, you know, I might even enjoy picking up her poop because I'm doing it for her. And she brings so much joy to our lives, right? So I just want you to realize that when we can shift ourselves into gratitude, I believe that gratitude is the antidote for stress. And so when we can shift our state like that, and it's important that throughout the day, when we find ourselves slipping, when we find ourselves distracted, shift our state of mind into something that connects us to what we're doing, into connecting us to what's important in our lives and also in what we're doing, connects us to the people that we're working with. Because these mindset drivers, these are the first 4 drivers that I talk about in my book, and gratitude crosses all of them, relating to a higher purpose, right? That is something that gratitude allows you to tap into, and it allows you to also give somebody else the feeling that they matter by giving a compliment, for instance. Self-talk, it helps us to manage that inner critic and to get a hold of some of that self-talk so that it supports us rather than hurts us. It also helps us to shift our focus to what we can control and what we do have versus the things that we don't have. And lastly, it's good for our body. We need to care for ourselves. It's critical. It's actually a must, because we store stress in the cells of our body. And so we have to release them through gratitude, through sleep, through movement. These are things that we absolutely must. They're not shoulds, they're musts. So at this time with the pandemic, you want to make sure that you're creating transitions throughout the day that are taking care of yourself and creating energy. And one last little thing, and then I'll wrap this up with a very quick story. Another quick thing that you can do for self-care if you're feeling stressed or you just need a release is you can imagine that something that you're concerned about, you're worried about, you can kind of imagine putting it in front of you, like 3 feet in front of you. Imagine it in a ball. And you can just take a deep breath in and blow it out. Nobody will even really need to know what you're doing. Just give a really deep blow out and blow that ball as if it were a balloon out into the next county. And this may seem silly, but it works. It works to help ourselves to release some of the stress that we have within us. We have to find the strategies that work for us. Some of you said music. Find the things that work for you and place those little energy releases throughout the day. Maybe it's a shower, right? Do the things that are really going to support you in that. And so lastly, I'm going to end with a story. I want you guys to write down what you're going to do. What's the action that you're going to take so that you actually take action from today, right? We gained a heightened awareness. We got some good strategies to think about. So what are you going to do about it? Make a commitment to yourself that you're going to do something about it. And so I'll just end with this story of this man. He comes to work with a tuna sandwich. And every day he complains about the tuna sandwich. Tuna again. I can't believe it's tuna. I hate the smell of tuna. God. And his buddy finally gets annoyed because he's listening to this every day. And he says, dude, why don't you have your wife make you something else? And he goes, I don't know what you mean. He goes, turkey, roast beef, something else. And the guy goes, I don't know what you mean. I'm single and I live alone. You can unmute and laugh really loud now. Okay, I'll tell you what it is in case you're not laughing. He's making his own sandwich. He's making his own sandwich. And the thing is, don't be that guy. There are things in our lives that we have 100% control over. And so it's up to us to get out of that learned helpless mode, that reactive mode, and be purposeful and own our actions, own our distractions, and own our energy and how we show up. That's going to make a huge difference to make you more productive, get the results that you want faster, and create more meaning and happiness in your lives. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you, Penny.
Awesome.
That was
Thank you
great.
very much.